Europe, early 16th century, a continent trembling under the thunder of cannons and the ambitions of kings. Renaissance cities glitter with art and learning, yet the streets reek of blood and smoke. Empires like Spain, France, and the Holy Roman Empire tear each other apart in endless wars, and Italy, fractured into city-states, becomes their chessboard. Amid the chaos, one boy in Brescia witnesses the horror that will define his life. His name is Niccolò Tartaglia, and before he can read or write, he learns the language of survival. When the French army storms Brescia in 1512, the young Tartaglia hides beneath the corpses of his family as soldiers slaughter civilians and burn the city. A sword strike splits his jaw open, an injury that will scar him for life and give him the nickname Tartaglia, meaning the stammerer. From that moment, his world becomes one of contrasts, unimaginable cruelty against an unbreakable will. The trauma does not destroy him, it forges him. Viewers are pulled immediately into the story of a man who will grow from a broken child into one of the most dangerous minds of the Renaissance, a man determined to make sense of a senseless world. The Italy of Tartaglia's youth is no place for dreamers. War and politics rule everything, and knowledge is power. Cities like Venice and Florence thrive on trade, espionage, and invention. Engineers are the new magicians, their designs coveted by princes and generals alike. Gunpowder is changing warfare forever. No longer are battles won by knights and swordsmen, but by artillery and the men who understand its secrets. Into this ruthless new era steps Tartaglia, a self-taught mathematician and engineer whose obsession with numbers becomes both his shield and his weapon. The young man's genius burns brighter than his poverty. Without access to noble patronage or formal education, Tartaglia teaches himself from borrowed scraps of books, solving problems that stump scholars and priests. His mind, unrestrained by tradition, begins to see connections between geometry and warfare, between the abstract beauty of mathematics and the grim reality of cannon fire. He starts to wonder, can the chaos of battle be reduced to predictable patterns? Can angles and arcs replace luck and blood? These are not idle questions in a time when entire cities depend on the aim of a single cannon. The camera lingers on his ink-stained hands, sketching parabolic arcs and siege machines by candlelight. His notebooks are filled with diagrams of walls, trebuchets, and trajectories. Every equation is a rebellion against the brutality that once silenced him. In the flickering light, he is not just calculating, he is fighting back, transforming trauma into theory. Tartaglia's world is one of contradictions. The church funds art yet fears science, scholars praise reason yet live off superstition. Amid this tension, his brilliance isolates him. His speech, damaged by his childhood wound, makes him a target of ridicule, but his intellect forces even his enemies to listen. His reputation spreads quietly from workshop to court, a man who can predict the path of a cannonball, a man whose mathematics can turn defeat into victory. Venice, ever hungry for military advantage, takes notice. The Renaissance is often remembered for painters and poets, but beneath the beauty lay a darker Renaissance, one of arsenals, spies, and experimental weapons. Tartaglia becomes part of that world, where ideas are more valuable than gold and more dangerous than swords. He works for military patrons who promise protection but demand secrets. His calculations begin to influence real battles, and with every success, his confidence and his paranoia grow. He is no longer the helpless boy under the corpses of Brescia. He is an architect of controlled destruction, a man who bends chaos to his will. Yet, behind the triumph, the seeds of tragedy are already planted. The same intellect that gives him power also isolates him. The same knowledge that wins wars also tempts empires to exploit him. In an age when genius can elevate a man one day and destroy him the next, Tartaglia's future hangs in the balance. The opening act ends with a haunting image, the mathematician standing alone on a Venetian dock at dusk, watching the smoke of distant cannons rise over the horizon. He has learned to outthink violence, but not to escape it. The year is 1537, and the fires of war burn brighter than ever. Across Europe, cities rise and fall under the roar of artillery. The age of the sword has ended, this is now the age of the cannon. Amidst this transformation stands Niccolò Tartaglia, no longer the traumatized child of Brescia, but a self-made scholar with a mind that sees what others cannot. He looks upon the booming guns not with fear, but with curiosity. While generals rely on instinct and luck, Tartaglia begins to ask the questions that will make him immortal. How far will a cannonball fly? At what angle will it hit its mark? Can war, the most chaotic act of man, be ruled by mathematics? In smoky workshops and candlelit studies, Tartaglia experiments in secret. He draws geometric arcs, measures angles, and records data by hand as cannons thunder on the Venetian front. The Renaissance world sees artillery as magic, unpredictable, temperamental, and dangerous, but Tartaglia sees it as a problem of nature waiting to be solved. His insight is revolutionary. The flight of a cannonball is not random. It follows a curve governed by mathematics. He begins charting trajectories, testing every possible firing angle, and realizes something no one else has ever proven, that the greatest range is achieved not at a steep angle but at 45 degrees. It's a revelation that defies the crude guesswork of gunners and promises to turn war into a science. This discovery becomes the foundation for his masterpiece, Nova Scientia, a new science. In it, Tartaglia dares to write what no one before him has, that the laws of motion can be understood and predicted through geometry. Published in 1537, the book is unlike anything the military world has seen. Its pages blend diagrams of weaponry with abstract equations, translating death into mathematics. Generals and engineers across Europe scramble to get their hands on it. For the first time, cannon fire can be measured, calculated, and replicated. The art of destruction becomes a precise craft. The success of Nova Scientia elevates Tartaglia to fame, but also draws dangerous attention. His peers, men of status and privilege, despise the fact that an impoverished stammerer from Brescia could claim such groundbreaking ideas. Some whisper that his theories are heretical, that to dissect nature so deeply is to challenge God himself. Others, especially those tied to the military elite, fear the implications of his discoveries. If anyone can learn to master artillery through numbers, then the monopoly of war held by kings and noble captains could crumble. Knowledge, not birthright, would command armies. Still, Tartaglia presses on, hungry for more. He begins corresponding with other scholars and inventors, exchanging letters filled with ciphers and coded formulas. His mind is now a battlefield of ideas, geometry colliding with warfare, philosophy colliding with survival. Every calculation, every experiment brings him closer to understanding not just how to control a cannonball, but how to control fate itself. The same intellect that could make him a hero could also make him a target of powerful men who would rather steal than share his genius. The emotional tension deepens as Tartaglia's brilliance begins to isolate him. Patrons demand exclusive rights to his work, offering gold and influence in exchange for secrets. He refuses, determined to keep his discoveries his own, but that defiance costs him allies. Rivals grow envious, whispering to the powerful that the stammering mathematician hides dangerous knowledge. In Venice, where espionage is an art form, Tartaglia's notebooks are treated like weapons. His equations, the very symbols of his mind, are now objects of political intrigue. Meanwhile, on battlefields across Italy, his theories begin to prove themselves. Venetian engineers use his methods to calculate firing arcs with terrifying accuracy. Sieges that once dragged on for months now end in days. The precision of Tartaglia's mathematics reshapes the art of war. To the soldiers who follow his formulas, he is a silent ally. To those who face his innovations, a ghostly executioner they never see. The camera would linger here, on cannon smoke curling across ruined walls, on the geometry of death traced invisibly in the air, while the narration reminds the audience that these lines, these arcs, are drawn by the same man once scarred by violence. Yet, behind every triumph, there is unease. Tartaglia knows that his success has come at a cost. Knowledge has made him valuable and vulnerable. Enemies, both intellectual and political, begin to close in. Among them is Girolamo Cardano, an ambitious Milanese scholar who sees Tartaglia not as a peer, but as prey. The seeds of their fateful encounter are sown here, in the shadow of Nova Scientia. As the section closes, Tartaglia stands in his modest Venetian study, surrounded by parchment and gunpowder residue. Outside, bells ring from the city's towers. The Republic celebrates another victory made possible by his calculations. But Tartaglia feels no peace. He stares at his notes, aware that the knowledge that once freed him from obscurity has now chained him to powers far greater than himself. The shot lingers on his ink-stained fingers, trembling slightly as he seals another letter, this one addressed to Cardano. It is an invitation to collaboration or to betrayal. The siege of Rome began not with a thunderous assault, but with silence, the kind of silence that comes before starvation. In the spring of 409 AD, Alaric's army encircled the Eternal City, sealing its gates and cutting every road, aqueduct, and supply line that connected Rome to the outside world. For the first time in 8 centuries, the capital of the empire faced an enemy it could not command, bribe, or intimidate. The Visigoths settled into a grim, methodical blockade. They were patient, Rome was not. Inside the walls, more than 1 million citizens waited in disbelief, clinging to the illusion that someone, anyone, would come to save them. No one did. Rome's walls were mighty, 15 feet thick in places, ringed by towers and gates built by emperors who had never imagined they might be used in defense against their own allies. The Visigoths knew better than to assault them outright. They had no siege engines, no ladders high enough to breach those walls, but they didn't need them. Time itself would be their greatest weapon. The Tiber River flowed quietly under the bridges, but its waters carried no grain barges now. The city that had once fed the world had become a prison for its own people. At first, the Romans laughed off the threat. The senators promised the gods would intervene, that the emperor in Ravenna would send legions any day. Merchants hoarded their grain, waiting for prices to rise. But as the days turned to weeks, laughter gave way to terror. Food vanished from the markets. Horses, dogs, and rats became currency. The wealthy barricaded themselves in their villas, feasting on whatever they could store, while the poor starved in the streets. Mothers watched their children waste away. The once proud city, whose forums had echoed with speeches of conquest, now reeked of death and desperation. Alaric waited. His army camped in disciplined order around the walls. No wild pillaging, no drunken chaos. He had forbidden his men from attacking the city outright. He wanted Rome to surrender, not burn. To him, the siege was not an act of barbarism but of justice. The Romans had refused him land and peace. Now they would pay the price for their arrogance. His envoys approached the gates under truce, demanding tribute, gold, silver, silk, and slaves. Inside, the Senate debated. Some wanted to fight to the end, others saw the futility. One senator, Palladius, reportedly asked the Gothic envoys what would happen if Rome resisted. The answer came coldly, "Then we will leave you your lives, but only within the walls." The negotiations dragged on as famine tightened its grip. Ancient historians described scenes of horror within the city. Starving families fought over scraps in the gutters. Corpses piled up faster than they could be buried. Some accounts, whispered but never forgotten, told of cannibalism. The gods of old seemed silent, the Christian saints no less so. Rome, the mother of nations, had become a tomb. Finally, in desperation, the Senate agreed to pay Alaric's price. The Romans stripped the temples of their gold, melted sacred statues, and gathered the treasures of centuries. It is said that when the gold was carted out through the gates, Alaric watched in silence, neither triumphant nor cruel. He did not hate Rome, he pitied it. He accepted the ransom and lifted the siege, but only temporarily. In his mind, peace had been purchased. But in Ravenna, Emperor Honorius saw only humiliation. He refused to ratify the treaty, and when Alaric sent envoys again, they were dismissed with contempt. It was the last betrayal. Alaric had offered mercy, Rome had answered with arrogance. Furious, he turned back toward the city he had spared. Once more, his army surrounded Rome's colossal walls, this time without patience or restraint. The people within, already broken by famine, now faced the unthinkable, a second siege. The air grew heavy with smoke from the Gothic campfires, and the night sky glowed red. Inside, the Senate descended into chaos. Some argued for surrender, others demanded resistance to the bitter end. The urban prefect tried to keep order, but starvation and despair had already unraveled the fabric of Roman life. Bands of the desperate roamed the streets, looting the houses of the rich, burning what they could not eat. The Tiber ran low and foul, disease spread faster than hunger. The eternal city was dying, not from the enemy at its gates, but from the rot within. Alaric watched from the hills, his resolve turning to steel. He knew that time had done its work. The walls of Rome might still stand, but its spirit had already fallen. The empire's pride, its discipline, its unity, all had crumbled long before his arrival. When his envoys rode to the gates one final time, their message was clear: open the city and live, or resist and be erased from history. Inside those walls, the Romans had no strength left to answer. The mighty empire that had once subdued the world was now reduced to whispers, prayers, and empty promises. The people waited for salvation from an emperor who would never come. The siege of Rome was not a single battle but a slow death. It was a reckoning centuries in the making, the final proof that Rome's glory was built not on eternity, but on human frailty. As famine gave way to silence and the smoke of funeral pyres drifted across the sky, all who looked upon the city knew that something sacred was ending. The eternal city, once the heartbeat of the world, was gasping its last breath, its fate now sealed by a king it had created and betrayed. After his public humiliation, Tartaglia's world collapses. The Republic of Venice, once eager to harness his intellect, now regards him with suspicion. His discoveries, once celebrated, become classified military secrets, locked away in government archives. He is still consulted for advice but denied credit, his ideas passed off under other men's names. The empire that once needed him now controls him, reducing his genius to a state tool. Venice thrives on secrecy, its wealth built on hidden knowledge. Tartaglia's ballistic equations, once symbols of human progress, are now guarded like weapons. His innovations make Venetian artillery the most feared in the Mediterranean, yet he remains in obscurity, watching others rise through deceit. The camera would follow him walking along the misty canals, his reflection fractured by the rippling water, the image of a man broken by the system he helped empower. Meanwhile, Europe's wars intensify. His theories guide gunners in battles he will never see, killing men he will never meet. Tartaglia begins to grasp the cruel irony of his life. He mastered the geometry of death, only to become its silent accomplice. He wanted to bring reason to chaos, but reason itself has been weaponized. His mind, once his freedom, is now his prison. Haunted by betrayal and stripped of recognition, Tartaglia withdraws from public life. His name fades from records, his manuscripts vanish into bureaucratic vaults. One evening, he watches ships sail from the Venetian harbor, vessels armed with cannons designed from his equations. The bells of St. Mark's echo over the lagoon as he turns away, realizing his intellect has outlasted him but his legacy no longer belongs to him. The empire he outsmarted has finally outmaneuvered him. Years slip quietly through the canals of Venice, and Niccolò Tartaglia fades into obscurity. Once celebrated as a genius, he now lives in poverty, surrounded only by the yellowing pages of his manuscripts. The sound of cannons, guided by the very formulas he created, drifts through his window each morning, mocking him with the echo of forgotten glory. His body weakens, but his mind refuses to rest. He spends his final years writing, revising, and dreaming of one last book that might restore his honor. But the world has moved on. Cardano thrives in fame, new scholars rise in his place. Tartaglia's letters go unanswered, his requests for patronage ignored. Venice, a city that once relied on his brilliance, now sees him as an inconvenience. Still, he keeps working, not for fame, but because the pursuit of truth has become his only reason to live. In his journals, he questions everything: the morality of science, the price of genius, and the cost of transforming knowledge into weapons. When he dies in 1557, no one notices. There are no ceremonies, no monuments, no mention in the records of the Republic. His manuscripts scatter, lost to time, some claimed by others, others destroyed. Yet his ideas endure. Galileo, Newton, and generations of scientists unknowingly build upon his foundations, giving life to the laws of motion and the science of trajectories that shape the modern world. The man himself is forgotten, but his work becomes immortal, the invisible heartbeat of progress. Tartaglia's tragedy becomes his triumph. Though he died alone, his mind reshaped how humanity understands motion, precision, and the mathematics of destiny. In the aftermath, the world sought meaning amid ruin. Rome's ashes became symbols of both loss and renewal. In North Africa, St. Augustine began writing The City of God, arguing that no earthly empire, however glorious, could last. His words reframed the fall not as divine punishment but as transformation, an end that birthed a new Christian world. Meanwhile, the Visigoths moved south, Alaric dying shortly after the sack. Legend claimed he was buried beneath a river, surrounded by Roman gold, his grave concealed forever. The man who humbled Rome vanished into myth, leaving behind an empire staggering toward oblivion. Yet Rome did not die completely. Its language endured, its laws shaped new kingdoms, and its ruins inspired awe across centuries. Even the conquerors adopted Roman customs, building their legitimacy upon the legacy they had once destroyed. The sack of 410 AD marked not just the fall of a city, but the end of an age. The classical world gave way to the medieval, and from the wreckage rose new powers and faiths that would define the next millennium. Rome's fall became history's greatest warning, and its greatest inheritance. Empires fall, but ideas endure. Rome, even in ruin, refused to vanish. Its shadow stretched across every future empire that dared to dream of eternity.